Meyer brand snacks promise the great value you expect with a quality guarantee in every bite. And summertime snacking is our most favorite snacking season of all because Meyer brand makes it deliciously easy. From new lemonade flavors to classic ingredients for backyard s'mores to creamy ice cream varieties like new limited edition Purple Cow by Meyer Very Berry Americana with ribbons of real strawberry and blueberry swirls waving in creamy vanilla ice cream. Stop into Meyer and discover big taste and bigger savings on Meyer brand summertime snacks.
Hello and welcome to Budget Arcade, a free to... Hello and welcome to Budget Arcade. Alright, I'll leave it in. Hello and welcome to Budget Arcade, a free-to-play gaming podcast to help you navigate through the growing realm of free-to-play games. My name is Jeff.
It's your boy, Mark.
It is my boy, Mark, and each and every other week, we play a free-to-play game and review it for you, but on these off weeks, Mark and I just get into a room and we sit there and we wait for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we put that on the internet.
I'm in my favorite chair, so I'm good. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm in a chair, which is better than not having one. So this week we are going to be just kind of recapping and highlighting the new Netflix docuseries called High Score that came out a week or two ago. And this is actually brought to my attention by a friend of the podcast, Lakendra. You can go check out her podcast. It's called I Just Want to Talk. It's part of the Imagineville Podcast Network, which is a network we are also part of.
Ooh, that was a good plug. I like that. That was.
Look, I'm really good at this.
Yeah, you are.
Thank you. So, if you don't know, it's High Score is a 6-part miniseries, a documentary series covering video games from basically from the Atari era, a little bit before the Atari era, up into the late Super Nintendo, round when Doom came out, era of gaming. And it covers the people, the games they made, the creative process, and the stories behind it. So Mark and I are just going to kind of pick some of the stories out. We're not going to do a full recap, but the ones that we enjoyed. And I'm going to let Mark go first.
Yeah, so the first episode touches on the origins of early arcade gaming, your typical Pac-Man, and one of the things I thought was super interesting about this, and that this whole docuseries was, if you are a fan of video game history, there are a lot of just little factoids throughout this series that will kind of blow your mind. And one of the first ones that comes to mind is that the creator of Pac-Man was originally designed for women. It was geared towards... It was geared towards the female gamer, and it was meant to just be this average, hey, we're gearing this towards women. It's slower pace than your regular dismissal. What was was it
Space Invaders was like
Space
the
Invaders
part of the first one.
Right. And so it was fascinating to see this unfold, is that Pac-Man was just this, placeholder title for women, and it just...
I agree.
It completely... It took off.
Women like pizza? Wasn't that the thing? Or, I mean, It was so ridiculous. I love Pac-Man. I think everyone does. Actually, I prefer Miss Pac-Man, which they get into a little bit. But I found that crazy too. I had no idea it was initially just like marketed towards women because Space Invaders was a boys' game.
Right. And so, like, you know, so Pac-Man took off, and, you know, the creator of Pac-Man, he's sitting in a pizza parlor, and he sees this pizza, and it's got 2 slices missing, and he's like, "Yep, that's my main character of this game I want to create," and the rest is history. But this series, and I love watching people explain their motivations behind things, and especially when it comes to video games, and something that the first episode just bleeds into is that, you know, there were people behind these games that they're the 70s and 80s were a crazy era for just coming up with new stuff. And, you know, the simplistic art that bred video games is crazy to me. You know, just these, hey, we just want to create this thing that eats things, and, you know, we're gonna market it towards women, and it's gonna grow into this multi-million-dollar idea, and that's crazy to me. That's
the white dots are cookies, so you have to use your imagination playing these old Atari generation games and early arcade games.
Yeah, no, the first episode is, and I feel like that's something that Netflix does very well, is that they draw you in with a very, you know, with High Score, it's a premise of video game history. And they draw you in with these little known factoids of, like, you know, the creator of Pac-Man, it's geared towards women, and it grows into this unstoppable force. And then after that, it's every episode is geared towards something different. So, yeah, no, that was my initial impression of this series was, holy crap, I didn't even know that was a thing that, you know.
Yeah. And one of the stories that fascinated me a lot was actually on the last episode, where these guys were hacking the Game Boy to try to get it to do 3D. Yeah. And he cracked it and got the sort of wireframe 3D to work on the Game Boy. Nintendo found it, and they thought they were going to get sued or shut down by Nintendo because, you know, traditionally Nintendo doesn't like anyone touching their stuff. It's like they're very protective. And instead, they get them to come up with a way to do 3D technology on the Super Nintendo. And, you know, and one of the things is Star Fox is sort of in our past, and I've grown up with it, and I forget that it is this groundbreaking piece of technology that first home console games with polygons, you know, and it's like, wow. But one of the things I really liked was they were building the game, and they gave it to Miyamoto, who, if you don't know, is the creator of Mario and Zelda and Metroid and maybe
Star Fox.
Metroid, but and Star Fox. Yeah. But he's like, I don't get it. You know, this isn't working. And he said, but we'll go home for Christmas and I'll come back with a solution. And they talk about these arches that you walk under in Japan, and he uses that for inspiration and kind of to back off of the guy who was just eating pizza and came up with Pac-Man, how simple inspiration can come from everyday things. And I thought that was cool. And he said, what if we put these things you fly through so you don't have to worry about your left and right and your six, but just what's in front of you? Because for us gamers, moving from 2D to 3D, that was maybe going to be a lot to ask, and also is going to be a lot to ask of the programmers. So by sort of adding that barrier, it made the game work better.
Well, I thought, you know, it's funny you mentioned Miyamoto's, because one of the things I saw, and it was in the last episode of this docuseries, which is 6 episodes, but and correct me if I'm wrong, Miyamoto died, right?
No, you're thinking of Iwata.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So, Miyamoto was very, as far as we know, like the standard gamer knows is that he's this crazy, he's got these just off the wall ideas and everything else is that, but like this series really painted him as a very simplistic, thinker. He was just he wasn't really on board with the whole, hey, let's go out of our way to create this crazy new idea, and for Star Fox at least, and and he he's like, oh, I love these arches, and like you said, it's Star Fox drew its original inspiration from this series of arches, which is, as far as I know, like 100 arches, just consecutive walkway in Japan, and he was like, yo, let's fly a plane through these arches, and it's like, a so simplistic idea that could morph into this crazy fun game that completely blows my mind.
Yeah, it's like, don't overthink it.
Right.
Especially in the early parts of gaming, it was just like, just don't overthink it. Let's just make it fun. So I kind of like bounce around, but what was the next thing that just comes to mind out of the docuseries that you remember?
So going back to the early episodes of this documentary is, I thought one thing that was super interesting was that Universal sued Nintendo of America over Donkey Kong, and I had no idea. I had no idea that even happened.
I knew that happened, but then they get into a creation of one of the iconic Nintendo characters and where that character came from that I did not know and was fascinated.
Yeah, so Nintendo hires a lawyer called his name is John Kirby, and as their defense in this lawsuit over copyright infringement over Donkey Kong. And so Universal suing Nintendo of America over their use of the Kong character, the ape in Donkey Kong, saying that it completely is a play on their own ownership of Donkey Kong, or I'm sorry, King Kong, and so Universal is suing Nintendo of America, and John Kirby is this lawyer who is hired to represent Nintendo. And long story short, Nintendo wins their defense of Donkey Kong, and so Nintendo
and real quick, their defense is that Universal doesn't even have rights to King Kong.
Right.
It's like, you can't own that property. You can't sue us because you don't own the property.
Right.
It's like public domain.
Right. And so Nintendo celebrates this monumental victory of whether or not they were infringing on anybody's rights for Donkey Kong by creating a character, Kirby, now historic character in video game lore, and they created it after this lawyer, this American lawyer, John Kirby, and I thought that's crazy. And it's little details like that where video game history really just kind of washes over you, and it's like, holy crap, this this character that everybody knows, whether or not you've played a Kirby game or you're a student of video game history, Kirby. You at least know who Kirby is, and seeing that come out of a legal battle of early Nintendo history it was pretty special.
So let's get to my favorite episode. So if you listen to the top 5 consoles episode, we'll just briefly, they get into, in 1983, the video game crash when Atari was kind of, the Atari 2600 was huge, but all these games came out. There was no regulation on them. Anybody could program for the thing, and some of them were garbage, and we didn't have the internet. And so there's no way of knowing what you were buying was good or not. And it caused this video game crash in 1983. Well, they get into Nintendo and the history of the company and then building the Nintendo Entertainment System. And they spend a lot of time with so there's both Sega and Nintendo kind of have this parallel story of the people who are in the region that sort of lead the marketing of the American marketing of these consoles, because if you don't know, the NES in Japan was called the Famicom, the family computer, and it wasn't sleek, it kind of looked weird, and so I can't remember her name, but this woman took over in America, and it's basically, we have her to thank for all the changes she made to the console, to that gray box that in the show they say was inspired by the DeLorean, you know, and what a perfect thing to inspire it by. And just, I thought that was cool, but I want to really get into the point where they bring in Sega. And as everyone who listened knows, Sega Genesis is my system. I love it. And they talked with the gentleman who ran Sega of America and the demands he gave the Japanese market of Sega, and saying, this is what you want this to be successful in America. Because the Genesis had, I didn't know this, had already been out for a good while and had like 8% of the market, maybe, you know, like they didn't have much. And so he's like, well, we need to, I'm going to forget one of the rules, but the first rule was like, we need to lower the price. The second one was we need to beat Mario. The third one is we need sports games.
Yep.
The fourth one is to be cool for teens. And then the last one was make fun of Nintendo. I think that's them. So they lower the price. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Not much to talk about there. But then they talk about the creation of Sonic, and the kind of, the guy got inspired by just going to theme parks and seeing roller coasters in America and just being inspired by that. Now, they didn't know what kind of animal they were going to be in there. They talked about they had a panda and they had some other, I don't remember all the ones, but all these other animals. And then eventually they got to the hedgehog and it just clicked. And I loved that.
Yeah.
They rolled. Go ahead.
No, what I didn't know is because I grew up with Sega, and so I'm a preteen when Sega's coming out. And so Sega really leaned in a whole lot to the, hey, we're the bad boys on the block. Sonic the Hedgehog, he's just this guy, the character that has no rules, and he's just he's a rule breaker, and he's geared towards adolescent teens that are, fighting the system, and Sega's partnership with MTV at the time. And I thought that was just and I go back and I'm like, was I watching MTV at the time that Sega was really, and I try to think, where was I at this time? And I was probably 12 years old when Sega was really coming and finding its own. And I remember playing Sonic, but I don't remember Sonic being this bad boy, right character. And I watching this documentary on Sega and seeing how, and I remember the mantra of the ad campaign, the whole Sega, where everybody was yelling out Sega, and I was struggling to remember, I don't remember Sega being the bad boy on the block, but
I will say this. You knew that they were the real deal when Mortal Kombat came out. because they talk about that here.
Oh, for sure.
And they get into the censorship board and not to be political, but me wanting to punch Joseph Lieberman in the face. Like, and some of these, there's one guy even worse. Like, I really don't have anything against Joseph Lieberman, but I do have problems with really old people who've never played a video game deciding whether or not we can play them or not.
Right.
And so that whole board of fogies and parents, there was one guy who had the most epic comb over of all time talking about how disgusting these games are. I'm like, you didn't even play the game, you know. Like,
your comb over is disgusting.
Yeah.
No, and so transition to, Sega fully leaned into, hey, we're gonna market our system, our games to a more adult video game atmosphere, and so that led into the discussion of Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter. Street Fighter came before Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat leaned into, hey, we're gonna have real blood. We're gonna have our characters perform these fatalities in game.
And they're digitized,
right,
as opposed to cartoony. There's a parallel here. Are you a wrestling guy? Have you ever watched professional wrestling at any point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big wrestling fan, but I've watched wrestling.
Well, then I don't hear anything else. So there's a parallel here that Mortal Kombat takes. Never mind. I'm going to dump the wrestling thing because nobody cares but me. But the whole idea is they're like, we're going to do it differently than the Street Fighter. Like so many times people try to make the next big thing by doing it the same way, right? By saying, oh, they're Street Fighters, so let's just do the same thing. And Mortal Kombat says, no, we're going to do it as different as we can. We're going to have digitized characters, violence, and so no one's going to mistake our game for a Street Fighter clone. And the point I was going to make in wrestling in the 90s, there was WWF at the time, and they had this kid-friendly content, and WCW said, well, we're just going to do everything the opposite way. All your characters have fake names, ours are going to use their real names, da-da-da-da. But creatively, I think that's what people is best, like if you want to make a game in a genre, think what you can do differently. And I think now we have Mortal Kombat, which is a great series, and actually in this day and age may be considered more successful than Street Fighter because of where it is now. Just talking about this generation, because Street Fighter X and 11 are all great games. Not Street Fighter, sorry. Mortal Kombat X and 11 are all great games. Right. But Street Fighter 5, or whichever the last one was, has been panned pretty much because it's a half-baked game. So it's kind of like full circle almost. Yeah,
and I think and I think it was episode 5 of this documentary that really, painted fighting games as the future of there was a niche for fighting games then, and there still is now, but like Street Fighter has been, in my opinion, been dead for a lot of recent video gaming, and Mortal Kombat has kind of carried the fighting genre through this current gaming.
Well, I would say yes. Also, but I honestly think the most popular fighting game in the world right now is Smash Brothers.
Oh, true.
Especially if you look at a competitive level. Like that's always the big one. Street Fighter is still there and heavily represented. And then you get my area, the games I love were like Soul Calibur and Tekken. I loved the Namco fighters.
Right.
But I agree. Like to me, people don't, get excited about Street Fighter anymore, but Mortal Kombat, a lot of people love the new ones, and good on them.
Yeah, no,
they had some time in the middle there where, like Mortal Kombat 4 and beyond, where it was like, what are you guys doing?
Right.
And now they're back.
Yeah, and so this docuseries touches on the origins of these fighting games, and one thing I didn't realize, and I probably knew it in the back of my back of my brain, but never really thought about was that the makers of Mortal Kombat originally wanted Jean-Claude Van Damme to be their.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, they wanted.
I wanted that.
They wanted Van Damme to be their face of.
They wanted him to be Johnny Cage,
right? And so
we wouldn't like. They literally wanted Jean-Claude Van Damme to play himself in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, because of Bloodsport. And
that would have blown my mind because I loved Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Who did
that era?
Who did it?
I loved him, and then you're telling me I can get a video game with Jean-Claude Van Damme
where I can control him,
things.
Right?
Oh God!
I can control him doing the patented Jean-Claude Van Damme split and
into the crotch punch.
Oh yeah.
Ah!
Oh, listen, and so the makers of Mortal Kombat, they approached Jean-Claude Van Damme. They're like, "Hey, we want you to be the face of our game and all this." And Jean-Claude Van Damme politely declines. And so they're like, "Oh, wait a minute. Now we got to go back to the drawing board. So we'll just make a character that kind of looks like Jean-Claude Van Damme. He has Jean-Claude Van Damme's moves, but he's not
a movie star.
Right, he's not Jean-Claude Van Damme." And I think that was probably, one of the biggest non-commitments in video game history where you have a character that resembles a movie star, but isn't the movie star, but has all the same character traits. And, we're talking about Johnny Cage here and in the Mortal Kombat, batting order of characters. And, it's just one of those things where it's one of those nuances that never really comes up, but you're like, wow, I really see the parallels. And now knowing the backstory
even to
behind
the point
it.
when they were making the movie, it was like they need to get Van Damme to play Cage, not
Right.
knowing this.
Right.
It was like he's the only guy. It's Van Damme, basically.
Right. And that blew my mind that they had actually approached Van Damme and wanted him to play this character. And then he declined. It was like, well, okay, we'll make our character
you anyway.
Right. Well, it'll be Van Damme, but his name is Johnny Cage.
Now, if anybody listening doesn't know who Jean-Claude Van Damme is, you need to educate yourself. You need to watch Bloodsport and Kickboxer. Start there. Also, Universal Soldier is excellent. Do you want to add one?
No. There's so many Jean-Claude Van Damme films. Jean-Claude Van Damme is
Sudden Death, the hockey one, Hard Target.
I think Kickboxer and Bloodsport are the two. Bloodsport's Bloodsport is the origins for the inspiration for Johnny Cage's character.
Right.
That the docuseries pretty much says that.
Yeah.
And so I think if you go back and watch those films, Kickboxer and Bloodsport, you'll see, and then you play an original Mortal Kombat game, you'll see the parallels. There's no other parallel that can be made behind Van Damme's inspiration for Mortal Kombat.
Now, if you don't want to watch a full movie to find out who Van Damme is, go to YouTube, type in Jean-Claude Van Damme and the word Volvo, like the car, Volvo,
yeah.
And probably the first option should be what you watch. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen
the most epic of splits.
Yeah, no.
Van Damme is the master. You want to start a Jean-Claude Van Damme podcast? Because I love the guy.
It'll be Budget Arcade Van Damme. We talk about everything.
No, Scott would not be okay with that. We'd have to make our own feed. But anyway, so I do want to talk about one other quick story they tell. There's a lot of stories here, but they talk a bit about esports and how it's becoming a thing and how it was scoffed at in a lot of ways. Like I've seen I was watching one of the HBO sports shows, and they did like a piece on esports where we're filling out these huge arenas, and they cut back to the panel in the office. They're all befuddled that people want to watch people play video games. And I'm like, well, who the hell are you? You're sitting around watching other people exercise. I love sports. I love football, but it's not any different. You're not doing the football. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're watching someone else be athletic while you sit on your couch. You're not any better. But they get into several competitions, and then they get into the Nintendo World Championships, and there's this young kid, he's playing and he's getting good, and, his parents take him to a tournament, and he does pretty well. And, like, the thing that got me about this as a parent is, like, they see that their son is enjoying himself, he's having fun, and hey, he might be really good at this.
Right.
And he wants to do it. Let's support him. And so they take him to the gaming thing, and he ends up winning the Nintendo World Championships. And they had the gentleman there, obviously an adult now, talking about it. And he's like, my mom was so proud of me. She was as proud of me if I won like the Super Bowl or whatever. And my parents, they just were like giddy for me. And they show some footage of the parents in the audience when he's playing. And there's something about it just got to me as like, allowing your kids to have their own dreams and to support it, whether you understand it or not. And, and I think, it just got to me. It touched me and I liked it.
Yeah. That 100%, I was in the same boat, is that, back in the early 90s when gaming was really becoming a thing, video games were slowly, and maybe not slowly, but breeding their way into households. You were no longer having to go to an arcade to play video games, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in the transition between arcade gaming and home console, and I remember getting my first console. And I remember it was the NES. I remember getting it for Christmas, and I remember playing Super Mario and just hooking it up to the TV and just playing for hours on end, just trying to make it to the next level. And there were no save mechanics back in those days. There was just, hey, you ran from point A to point B and see how far we could get from point A to point B. And, so watching these kids and hearing their stories of, hey, I participated in the, Nintendo World Championships or the Sega, time trials or whatever it was. I remember those days. So I think this whole docuseries is a nostalgic, time warp of, those individuals like myself, you, and whoever else is listening that grew up in this time era that said, hey, watch our documentary and participate with us in this time warp of video games golden age. And that's what got me with this whole thing. And while it's 6 episodes long, and some episodes are more nostalgic than others, but as a whole, man, if you wanna transport yourself back to when video games were just all the rage and everybody was trying to one up each other, with new ideas, man, this documentary was that's what this documentary did for me.
Yeah. And it showed me too, like where inspiration come from. I think if you don't play indie games, like if you're someone who only plays the AAA titles, I think you're missing out. And I think indie games are where that innovation is going to come from that we saw from guys like Miyamoto in the 80s.
Yeah.
The people who aren't under a corporate deadline that are allowed to just be creative and make what they want to make, I think you definitely need to check out some indies to see that there.
Well, I think
the other thing.
Wait, hold on, let me. So, and you talk about indie games, and I think the original indie game was where, and it touches on the idea in the first episode of this documentary, is the enhancement kits.
I did want to talk about I had no idea these existed.
Right, I didn't either. To me. And so
it's the original mod.
Yeah, right. But that's the indie platform birth, where these guys said, "Hey, we can take this game, but we can improve on it, and we can make something new and exciting." And we can sell it, and we can market it, and we can create a niche video game atmosphere, in the corner of our arcade by improving and modifying an original title. And I just think that was the birth of indie gaming, at least in my opinion.
And what was cool for me in that was that I just said at the beginning, I prefer Miss Pac-Man. And these guys in a garage making these kits to alter the original Pac-Man eventually just came on board and made Miss Pac-Man.
Yeah.
And I think you can look at Nintendo today and see that it's a very different company than it used to be, where now they're shutting down a lot of fan sites, they shut down, there was a Metroid 2 remake, they shut that down. And because they had their own remake coming, and instead of maybe bringing these people on, where if you look at Sega, who granted is a lot smaller of a company and nowhere near as successful nowadays, but they had someone make a fan game of Sonic and said, you know what? Why don't you make that fan game for us? They called it Sonic Mania, and that game's amazing. And I just wish we could see more of that. But just kind of piggybacking off my own point about companies changing, if you want to know what EA was before they were corporate suits making microtransactions in games, you can go on the Sega Genesis episode when they talk about the birth of EA Sports and how it was just people who really liked sports and they made games. And, obviously there was leadership changes since then, and it's become what it is now, where it's been voted the most hated company in America back-to-back years recently. And it just kind of shows where the passion leaves, and and you get the stagnation. And
so I think it's episode 4. I go back to my notes on this, and it's episode 4 is where they really dive into the Sega and EA Sports venture, and EA Sport, Sega. So EA Sports and Sega really go hand in hand, and it's because Sega wanted to promote, hey, we are a video game company that is marketing ourselves to the sports fan, by the original Madden football. And they dive very, deep into, how they marketed their video game to Madden and said, hey, and they even go as far as to say we originally wanted it to be 7-on-7 football, but Madden, John Madden himself told us, well, that's not real football. You have to have
put his foot down.
Right.
I'm not going to do it if you don't do 11.
Right.
11.
Right. Yay. And so that by John Madden putting his foot down on, hey, it's not real football unless you have 11 people playing 11 people. That really forced Sega and EA to completely dive into the, hey, we actually need to have a revolution in this game so 11 people can be doing 11 different things on the screen at once. And and that, to me, that was fascinating. It's because I didn't know that. I didn't know that John Madden inadvertently evolved video games in that time to become more than what we had just been playing as a platform video game. And I thought that was fascinating. And that's what this docuseries really does well, is that they take these little known factoids and they really dive in on them, and they completely shed new light on video game history that you wouldn't know without this.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to leave it. I think you could tell by the way Mark's talking. I certainly recommend the series if you have a Netflix account. Check it out, especially if you don't know a lot about the history. There's a lot to learn, and if you do think you know a lot,
there's a lot to learn.
There's a lot to learn still.
Right.
I saw so many things that was like, I did not know that.
Yep.
That's so interesting. The Star Fox thing blew me away.
Nope.
I didn't know that it was some guys in a closet modding Game Boys that gave us Star Fox.
Right.
And so I definitely recommend this.
Now, so, and I feel like we'd be doing an injustice review if we didn't say that it's not perfect. The series, it's 6 episodes, and it doesn't touch on the entire history of gaming. The last episode where it touches on Star Fox, it doesn't. We don't get into the modern video game history where Microsoft and Sony dive in and completely revamp things. So I think there is room for improvement, but man, this series is such a ground. It lays the groundwork for another season of this of High Score. I hope they make a season 2 of High Score where it touches on those things.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, that I think this is a good place to end, though, because really it's Sega versus Nintendo, right? And at the time, even though Nintendo's kind of a sports company, they have other side things they do, like toys, and they have these side things, but generally Nintendo and Sega are gaming companies, right? And then in the next generation, you have Microsoft and Sony insert themselves, and the landscape of gaming changes from being gaming companies to being big corporate bruiser, heavy hitters now in this market. And who knows where gaming would be if that didn't happen and it was just Sega and Nintendo battling out for years. I don't know, but there's definitely a lot to talk about there. Should they make a season 2?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, this is Budget Arcade. We are here every Tuesday with something. This coming Tuesday, we are playing Archer. What is it?
Danger Phone.
Danger Phone.
It's a terrible. It's a terrible game. Yeah, it sucks.
But be sure to check that out next week. But until then, you can find us on our website, budgetarcade.com, Twitter and Instagram at budgetarcade, and facebook.com/budgetarcade. You can get some of our merch at hotkeygaming.com/budget-arcade. Be sure to use promo code ButtBiscuits. There's another. Our music is by Stimmage. You can find his music on metroidmetal.com. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Imagineville Podcast Network.